Alright, today in this video we are going to be breaking down a 14 Halls of Atonement. This was done in week 1 of the season. This was done a few days ago now. The commentary is coming out a little bit later than I'd like. I've just been extremely busy the last couple days. In this video, we're going to talk about everything that we did right, wrong, and everything in between, talking about routing, strategy, kind of what was going through our head in this run, and some areas of improvement for sure. We are running a Frost Mage, Outlaw Rogue, Fury Warrior composition, so we are going to have a lot of kind of AoE uncapped with the Frost Mage, as well as a lot of single target with the Frostfire. And then, of course, we're going to have kind of that consistent sustain through the Outlaw Rogue and the Fury Warrior. So getting into it, we are going to actually pull these two Dark Blades. Sometimes we do skip them, but in this case, we decided that we are going to just get them on the first pull with Lust. Now, the big thing to look out for here is going to be these Obliterators doing their Wicked Bolts. If they overlap with the Shard of Halkias, it can spell lethality for some of your characters. Now, Lust is going to help us do a ton of damage on those first pull as well. We're going to expel that Weapons of Order, and running Shado-pan means that we're going to be looking to expel as many Flurry Strikes as possible. So, luckily, Brewmaster can do a ton of damage. So making sure those bolts are still locked down, we are going to actually paralysis the one Houndsmaster and bring in the Gargans. Now, one thing that people aren't super aware of is that Houndsmasters will give a 25% damage reduction to any Gargan within 25 yards. So we want to make sure we're pulling those Gargans away to get them down nice and quickly. Now, luckily for us, Gargans also don't do a lot of damage to Brewmaster, so we're chilling. And when the Houndmaster is in play, we are keeping an eye out for the Loyal Beast casts. So the last Thrash is coming out from Halkias now, and then once this shard goes off, we are going to then be pulling this Houndsmaster. So the Houndsmasters are a little weird because they're very difficult to move. I think sharpshooter mobs should be banned in this game, or they should be a little bit easier to move. I think being able to interrupt the shoot casts, or there being maybe a global or two in between each shot, allowing them to move a little bit easier would be nice. Obviously, things like Death Grip can be utilized, but we're not playing with the DK, so the Houndmaster, unfortunately, is going to sit out a little bit, and he's going to start pelting our Mage, and unfortunately, the shot followed by the Wicked Bolt that wasn't interrupted caused Xeno to die here. Now, we end up getting the kick on the Loyal Beast. Oddly enough, the Houndsmaster will start running once you kick. It, like, locks them out from shooting for a few seconds, which is just kind of funny. And then one other thing you might notice is that we decided to pull a Slasher into this pack. Slashers generally can be pretty scary for some tanks. Luckily, Brewmaster is very, very strong here. And it's really just like a frontal knockback, and make sure you're not casting on the disrupting. And if you can do those things successfully, you're going to be absolutely fine. So here's the Disrupting Screech. This does a little bit of AoE damage along with interrupting any spell casting. As you can see, even on a 14 early on in the season, it's only doing about 20% of our group's health. Now that's contingent on, of course, having absorbs and maybe DRs active. But for the most part, we're going to just finish off the Slasher and then get into the next pull. So our next pull is going to consist of this left side Obliterator and Darkblade. We're going to then grab these Groundskeepers. Unfortunately, I missed one, so I have to kind of run back and get a Crackling Jade on it. And then we're going to get this Houndsmaster pack with the Gargans. Now, these Gargans are going to take a little bit less damage because the Houndsmaster is present in the pull. There isn't really a good way to counter this. Yeah, I could have CC'd him out and then pulled the Gargans back, and then we could have pulled the Houndsmaster into the next pull. But this pull isn't as scary because we don't have a Shard of Halkias kind of looming about, casting Thrash and kind of spawning circles in the ground. So big thing here is Groundskeepers. If you can prevent them from running away, great. You can utilize this using like things like Stun or Insane Slows. Luckily, we have a Frost Mage applying a 60% slow to a lot of these Groundskeepers. We also have our Warrior opting in for Piercing Howl, which is a 70% slow on a 30-second cooldown, so he's able to apply that when the Groundskeepers get low. This is really good in this dungeon. It's also really, really powerful in a dungeon like Gambit, where you have Murlocs fleeing. So I will probably talk about that in a future video very soon. But with that pull going down, we are heading into the next pack. Now, I haven't really talked about my defensives too much. Your defensives in this dungeon, there aren't like a crazy amount of tank busters. When you are pulling one of the slashers, for example, one of the giant gargoyles, that's a good time to use defensives. The Gargans also can deal a fair bit of damage to the tank, along with all the Groundskeepers autos, so just chaining your defensives after Weapons of Order is a good place to start. So what I like to do when I'm using defensives, or I guess offensives as well, is we start with Weapons of Order, which gives us a Call to Arms cow. Then we're going to use our regular cow, Invoke the Black Ox, and then we're going to go like to Dampen and then to Fortifying Brew. And then by that time, our Weapons of Order comes back up, and we kind of do that same cycle over and over again. The defensive cadence for Brewmaster Monk this season is so much better with our current setup, having access to all of those abilities on a 2-minute cycle. So this pull is kind of going down. The big thing we were looking out for in this pack was mostly those Wicked Bolts. Curse of Obliteration, while it has Curse in the name, is actually a magical Dispel. So that player is just making sure that they're spreading out, using an offensive, and getting a Dispel whenever it is possible. With 2 Obliterators in the pull, I believe there's enough time for the healer to get both Dispels as long as they do it immediately. If you're pulling more than 2 Obliterators, you're probably going to have a rough time, or the Curse of Obliteration will expire, dealing a burst of damage to that player. So just be a little bit careful. Anyways, we are now going to be grabbing this 3-pack here, which is 2 Dark Blades and an Obliterator, and then we're going to be pulling this pack here and line of sighting right kind of along the this like pillar archway. And what this does is it forces the Houndmaster and the Obliterator in this pack to come out a little bit, and then we can line of sight inside, getting everything nice and stacked. Now the Gargans should be taking 25% reduced damage because we do have 1 Houndmaster in here. The Loyal Beast cast is going to end up getting kicked by Carrot at the very last second. That was a very good heads up play by him. Wicked Bolts are going to get stopped, and we are going to try to utilize any kind of group kind of CC that we can. So we deployed that Cap Totem earlier on in the poll, then we used Thunderstorm. We still have access to Shockwave and Blind if needed. Unfortunately, this Houndmaster is kind of sitting far out, but it's not a big deal. Now I'm going to be saving a lot of my defenses for the next pull because it is also going to be fairly big. And one thing you'll notice is I had a debuff on me for a few seconds there. It just got dispelled. It is a damage taken increase from the Dark Blades that's applied. It's 2% per stack, so at 5 stacks I'm taking 10% more damage. It's not really dangerous until you're above that amount, but you can dispel it if you need to. But healers should prioritize dispelling the curses, the Mark of Obliteration or Curse of Obliteration before dispelling the tank. The tank should just be able to use defensives and live. Now, I'm running out to get a paralysis on the Houndmaster Patrol because we don't want that coming in. We only want to really deal with 1 Houndmaster at a time because shoot overlaps and obviously having more Loyal Beast cast to kick can be problematic. Now, fortunately enough, I was able to actually hold off on a lot of my defensives until this point in the pull where I actually use Dampen Harm. This is mostly to counter like the knockback as well as some of the Gargan melees and the Dark Blade debuff. So big thing here, again, the Obliterator needs to be kicked and the Houndmaster needs to be kicked. But outside of that, most of the mobs are just doing melees. We're watching out for the frontal, which is baited on the tank. So tanks can control which way that the slasher is going to be facing their frontal. For a melee heavy composition, the frontal is barely a mechanic, honestly. And you can also outrange it here if you ever need to. So the slasher is something that we're going to kind of pull around from pull to pull as we kind of start killing it and just kind of casually cleave it down. It's really not as problematic as I thought earlier on in the season. They're not the most efficient percent for how much health they have, but they aren't lethal enough where you need like extra kicks or anything like that. You just have to pay attention to the disrupting shout. Anyways, we end up pulling the patrol, the Obliterator, and the Dark Blade that was nearby, as well as the 4 groundskeepers that were kind of down this like downward hill path. Groundskeepers, you do want to be a little careful in this area because there is a slasher to our left, which we don't want in our pull. If it got pulled, it's kind of whatever, but we don't want it because we're going to be going into the next shard pull here in a second, and that getting pulled means that we kind of have to either have to delay, or it'll make that pull a little bit more difficult with having to dodge frontals, and obviously there's the knockback tank buster. So once this pull goes down, we're going to be heading to our 3rd shard. Now, Halkias' Anima is at 66%, and it doesn't start going up to that 100% until this shard is killed. So we need to, we'll have to buy some time after this shard dies, waiting for the boss to spawn. And so what we're going to do in that time is actually pull some more trash, which I will talk about once we get there. One thing I haven't mentioned yet is this collector doing its Siphon Life cast. You want to be applying any type of CC to it, but not necessarily kicking it. It is a channel that will leech basically health off of the player it's targeting, also dealing a fair bit of damage. So your goal is to just stop it with, things like Ring of Peace, Paralysis, Cap Totem was just applied there. I had a really late ring that was really dumb. I actually knocked things out of the Frozen Orb, so we lost a little bit of damage there. So that was kind of bad on my part. Now you're going to be seeing me do a lot of damage every like other pull or so. Weapons of Order for Shado-pan Monk does a ridiculous amount of AoE damage, especially if you proc Shadow, the Shadow Wisdom of the Wall buff really early, which I was able to proc there. You can generally assume it will proc at some points. Ideally, you want it to proc earlier in the cooldown instead of later. Sometimes you might low roll and you might not get one at all during your Weapons of Order window, but having that force set is so powerful. We are now sitting on Dampen, Fortifying, and we have a Black Axe Brew available, so we are feeling pretty healthy. The big tank damage mostly comes later on in the dungeon when you're kind of past the Shard of Halkias, or the the sin-stained Goliath here, this first boss. So going into this next pull, we are going to be grabbing the Slasher and going into this 5-pack here. This 5-pack has a Houndmaster, an Obliterator, a Darkblade, and 2 Gargants, all mobs that we've seen before. Blowing up the Houndsmaster is probably the priority. That or the Obliterator. The Slasher really doesn't do that much, and we can always pull more trash onto the Slasher if needed. I'm going to try to make sure that the frontal is facing away, and we want to be careful of the Stone Fist knockback. I honestly need to update my weak orb package because originally I thought we'd never actually want to pull these mobs, but I'm finding that they're fairly efficient in terms of like, they're not that dangerous to most tanks. You can kind of just walk from pack to pack with them. Of course, you do have to be careful of the knockback, but that's not really that big of a deal. So I did have my Black Ox active this pull as well as that Weapons of Order, so I was able to sustain a fair bit of damage here. Black Ox can do a lot of damage, and they're actually, I've been getting this question a lot about like Blackout combo priority. You definitely don't want to keg smash in AoE, like in terms of Blackout kick combo or Blackout combo. There is the ideology where like you could technically try to do that to fish out more Purifying Brews for stomp damage, but I don't think I think that's like not super important. Anyways, we are pulling Groundskeepers and the Obliterator and Darkblade into this boss fight. Now this is going to be very painful for the tank player. We have a pretty nasty tank buster. We're going to have sonic damage. We're going to have the Groundskeepers doing a ton of damage to us in terms of melee. We're going to be taking more damage from the Darkblade, so we want to be super careful. Now, one thing I will be doing, though, is utilizing any defensive I have and trying to stack up the kind of glass shards that happen from this debris. That was a terrible bait, by the way. Not the end of the world, because we're just going to move the boss away, but you want to try to bait the debris near old like glass shards on the ground. I think it targeted our mage. It generally prioritizes range players when it can. It can occasionally go on melee, but generally speaking, I believe it will always target mage followed by like a range healer, and then it will start going on melee if you have like a full melee comp. Anyways, right here we're going to be targeting the Houndsmaster, getting a paralysis on it, then we're going to be pulling in the Gargants once that tank buster is finished. Now these mobs can, again, deal some fairly hefty damage. Luckily, we don't have to worry about loyal beasts or any shoots coming out from the Houndsmaster. So we're going to handle this basically, we're doing like almost like 3 separate pulls onto boss. First, it's Groundskeepers, the Darkblade Obliterator with Lust, then it's going to be Gargants by themselves, and then we're going to finish it up with the Houndsmaster by itself and just cleave it down underneath the boss. So the general priority, or not, the spell sequence goes Tank Buster, then it'll be the Glass Shard, throw debris on a range player. That's going to happen twice, so it's like a 1-2-1-2, then it's intermission. Then after intermission ends, it's going to be a 2-1-2-1-2 intermission, and it's gonna always have that cadence afterwards. It's always going to be basically 5 pools are going to spawn, and then you want to pull the boss away to have enough room for the refracted sin light, which is kind of the intermission, the AoE that's spinning around. Unfortunately, I kind of put that shard in a bad spot, and not only that, it's like in this like red foliage on the ground that we want to definitely be careful of. So I'm going to do my best to pull the boss away. Unfortunately, I think players should have enough room being directly in melee or obviously at the edge of the circle, but it's a little spooky. Leg Sweep gets applied here. I just want to make sure that no one's taking damage during this phase while having to move. We just want to basically be focusing on damage. Loyal Beast, you can let it go off technically because there's no beasts in this pull. It's not going to buff the boss. They just still try to cast it for some reason. I think that's like a weird behavior, in my opinion. It's not the end of the world. Actually, when you kick it, it moves, so it's not actually terrible. Never mind. Disregard what I just said. And yeah, this boss is just so beefy that we try to do our best to pull everything on top. Now, I've tried pulling slashers onto this boss. It's really hard to do. The extra frontal makes it really difficult to like dodge things. It also requires like a little bit more unoptimized movement from the tank, which could end up clipping a DPS player who's not paying attention. You have like an interrupt that can overlap with sonic damage that could be pretty bad from any of the debris landing. And then you also have the knockback, and if you're playing a tank that can't counter the knockback every time, it can knock you out of the circle, you get feared, and then it's like GG. So it's pretty rough. Okay, so we got out of the first boss arena at 69.31% count. This is good. We are looking very healthy in terms of percentage. We are trying to minimize the amount of trash we pull in the back half of the dungeon because they're just really problematic. The Eviscerators have an instant cast AoE cleave that's really, really nasty. The Ankle Biters apply like random debuffs and roots, or not roots, but like snares to random players, also dealing damage. And then you have the Wicked Bolts and the Curses. So we want to not pull anything up here. Brewmaster also does a very poor job at handling the Reavers. The Reavers are the big kind of gargoyle-y men who are standing off to my right that you might see. And yeah, they suck. Healing absorbs at 50% on a tank that's kind of reliant on being healed all the time. Spells disaster, like every single time. So we've tried pulling them. I've seen Guardian Druids and like Prot Warriors not even worry about pulling them, and they just take they have the 100% healing absorb and they're fine. But a Brewmaster really, really struggles. Now, Celestial Brew actually bypasses that, and that's a big reason why I'm running Celestial Brew specifically in this dungeon. If we happen to pull one, but for the most part, we're just going to not worry about pulling any of those guys. So we're handling this Eviscerator by himself because I don't want to have 3 in the pull because they could actually just combo someone, specifically our mage. Everyone else in this, actually, this pull is pretty tanky. So finishing up this pack is going to put us roughly at 82, I believe, give or take, and that's around where you want to be heading into the Cathedral. So I'm actually pulling up the route here to make sure that we need 82.24% count, and I believe that's going to put us right at that count here. So we're at 77.999, 4.25 will put us right at that 82.24. So this pack is more of like a cooldown recovery. We still popped Icy Veins. I think it might have been the play to hold, but that's a-okay. So we're going to mount up. This Slasher is going to turn to stone in 3 seconds. And then we are going to kind of just waddle our way up the hill. We want to not pull the right-hand pack. Unfortunately, I think I got a little close there to that Slasher. So I meld, and then our Warrior tries to meld, but unfortunately, Spectral Sight, he's able to see through the meld. So what we end up doing, this is not optimal. This is not part of the route. This is going to put us over percent. We are going to actually just pull this guy, do him by himself, and we're going to live with the consequences. So this mob, we were thinking about pulling it onto boss. We were discussing it in comms. We thought it was going to be too lethal, potentially. So we decided to just, again, kill this boss by itself. Or this not even mini boss, just this mob. I believe it was my fault for pulling the Slasher, but I think having someone meld, I think we should have all tried to make it really, really far up in the room before trying to meld instead of melding on the stairs, because when a mob has Spectral Sight, it's going to see you if you're melding too close to it. So that's kind of both my fault as well as Carrot's, but it's all good. We end up timing this key, and that's why I'm making this video. So we are banking a lot of our cooldowns for boss. We're now going to have the Icy Veins coming back up. We have Avatar Wreck, and we have just an Outlaw Rogue, who is a cooldown in itself. And we're going to pull him off to the side. Now, the best thing that your range can do is bait away from melee at the start of this fight to make sure that these pools of the Blood Torrent aren't near melee to make it a little bit easier to kind of traverse around these Stone Fiends. We're going to land kicks. We're going to land some CC on them. They don't have to be super grouped, but having them in melee is definitely going to be beneficial. Then the Shattering Stone Leap is going to come out and do a little bit of damage to that player who was targeted. Now, luckily, things like Spell Reflect actually reflect the dot off, so he does take a bit of damage from that, but it doesn't apply the dot to him. So warriors are very, very, very strong on this fight, and so are things like mages and rogues, of course. So the name of the game on this fight is basically stay near melee, have adds group up. The biggest point of contention is when the adds come out, the boss will also cast Blood Torrent at the same time, which because there's so much going on with new adds coming in, a lot of players kind of panic and they start looking at the adds, trying to figure out what they're going to kick, and they're not looking at their feet. And we end up, I think we might have a death here to Blood Torrent or maybe something else. But basically, we're trying to group up the mobs. I see that the right-hand side is kind of grouped, so I'm going to ring them to get them all nice and close. And we're going to try to blow them up. Now, the adds do burst when they die. You can see as they die, like, we're going to take a ton of damage there. So we could have probably killed them all in the same exact global and lived. But any key higher than this actually would probably kill people. So CCing one out or killing them late or, like, really focusing down the first few that spawn, or I guess one side, is pretty good. Unfortunately, I believe that was a death to the... I think he got clipped by the leap. And then tried to blink, and he blinked into the pool on the ground. So a little unfortunate. Anyways, third ad set comes out. This will probably be our last ad set that we have to deal with. So we want to make sure that as they're getting low, we actually use the defensive or something to prevent some of this burst damage. Now here's that swirl. It's kind of hard to see with all of the nameplates and all of the different casts going on, but no one died there, so we're good. And Echelon should go down before we really get another ad set. I can't remember if Xeno sends Icy Veins here. I think he holds for the next pull. So at this point we were kind of discussing, okay, so we have a little bit extra count. Now there's nothing we can realistically skip because all of the packs after this point are worth more percent than what we pulled, and they have like special sight and they're all linked together, or a lot of them are linked together. So we were like, okay, so we are going to just have to accept the fact that we're going to have to overpull. So what is the best thing that we can do here? Now, normally, what we do after Echelon is I pull everything up to the next boss, and I pull it back to this room, and we just AoE it down. It's also right next to this waypoint that we just unlocked to our left, meaning that if anyone does die, including myself, that I can quickly release and just get back to the pull. Now, instead, we have decided to, because for basically just timer, we're going to actually pull all of these, basically just the first room, pull it back, keep it a little bit smaller, and then we're going to pull the remaining trash onto boss. Now there's a couple of problems with pulling onto boss, and I'll talk about that once we get there, and mostly around dispels, but we actually employ a strategy that actually is relatively beneficial and ends up keeping one of those casters out. So Xeno goes down, but our waypoint is here, so he can simply just release and go. Now, unfortunately, he did die in the Icy Veins window, which means that we're going to lose a lot of damage here, so this pull is going to take a little bit longer than we'd like. Making sure we stop the Loyal Beast cast is super important, and then we are just going to start kiting if we need to. Now, the big thing that you're looking out for in this pull is the Mortal Strike cast from that Reaver. When that happens, you feel free to kite. Utilizing defensives early and often is also good. I am still sitting on Black Ox and Fortifying Brew for some reason. I am not playing well. I think I'm thinking a little bit too much about the route right now, but making sure you use Black Ox and using Fortifying Brew is super, super healthy. Finally, we just have the 3 Gargants left. It's all good. They're always gonna die later as long as there's Houndmasters in the pull because they're taking reduced damage. All right, so next we're gonna apply the Windrush to the group. Then we're going to start shrouding in here. Unfortunately, I'm kind of dumb and I didn't do that. So the Obliterator is a thing that casts the curse on people. So I'm going to actually paralysis it and then pull the pack. And this puts us on like a roughly 1 minute timer to kill this trash off before the Obliterator comes in. And once the Obliterator does, we're going to focus it down. Now, the reason why we CC out the Obliterator is because this boss applies 2 dots to the party. As you can see here, it's on Carrot right now. And if you also have the Curse of Obliteration on top of all of that, it can be extremely problematic, especially when there's things like Siphon Life, and of course, like other casts going off. Now, as a tank, I really like to pull the boss near 1 canister, so melee don't have to think. They just have to stand near melee, they can sit near the wall, and the ghost will always come to them. One other thing I'm doing is I'm using Hasty Provocation to taunt those ads faster. Now, what they do is they pulse AoE damage every like 1.5 seconds or 2 seconds or whatever. And I think they ended up nerfing it from PTR, so it might be, I think it's 1.5 or 2. But provoking it doesn't make it pulse faster, but it will make it move faster towards whichever canister is. So in theory, you're going to maybe save 1 tick of that damage, which is technically like a weird way to like make it like sound like you're giving your group a DR in a way, or you're reducing the damage your group's going to be taking. So we're doing our best to lock down this Obliterator. The Wicked Bolts overlapping with anyone with the dot on them can be problematic. So at this point, you can let the casts go on the tank from Aleez because they're always going to target the tank. It's essentially a tank buster, and just focus down the Obliterator, making sure it's locked down with things like, CC or just kicks in general. So here we go. I'm going to actually apply Touch of Death. Touch of Death is going to give me the Fatal Touch buff, which means I'm now doing 5% more damage, and I just popped Weapons of Order, so I'm now doing 5% more damage inside of my cooldown. I did provoke this ghost, thinking it was targeting someone who was going to be near a canister. Unfortunately, he was actually running the other way from the canister because he didn't see it behind the boss, so kind of my bad. If you are going to provoke it, it does melee, which can be problematic for like cloth-based classes. So don't provoke it until you know the person's in the right spot. Now the canister is kind of far. I'm pulling the boss kind of the wrong direction. I'm waiting, and then I think I end up provoking the boss on accident. And then someone vanished and put the fixating ad on top of me, so I ended up dunking it in the canister. So I'm going to put down 2 markers because I realized that it's probably easier to see the markers than look for the canisters, and I can always then comment out. So I'm like, canister on blue, players are near blue, and it's all good. And then canister is going to spawn on green, so I'll say canister on green, and we'll move over there. This fight at this point now is going to be very, very chill. It's dodge circles, dispel players, and that's it. It's pretty chill. So here we are. It's kind of, I don't know why, like, I stopped pulling the balls near the available canister, which I don't know why. I just stopped doing the thing that I should be doing. But that's okay. We'll learn and we'll get better. And now Aleez is just about to finish up. So we have 6 minutes remaining. We are budgeting roughly 4 minutes for the last boss and probably 1.5 to 2 minutes for the mini-boss here. The mini-boss has been nerfed since the start of the week. Unfortunately, this mini-boss was super overtuned at the start of the season, so this was definitely a low success rate dungeon. With some of the changes they made, I think there's a lot of areas of improvement, mostly regarding percentage or count in the dungeon, but this mini-boss is a little bit easier. We are going to be deploying that Lust as soon as the first Dark Communion comes out, or whatever the ability is called, which heals him. So you don't want to Lust and then have him heal immediately. You want to delay your Lust and cooldowns until he does that first heal while he's pretty much topped, and then you're going to blow him up. Now, one other thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be moving him around trying to kill these souls. Now, back in the day, you used to have a Venthyr Boomkin who would just delete this entire room in about 30 seconds, so it was all good and all kosher, but now we obviously don't have access to a Venthyr Boomkin, and we're playing a composition that is more cleave-based, right? Like, a lot of our AoE, it's not really spread, it's are they in Blizzard? Are they in Frozen Orb? Are they nearby to be affected by Meat Cleaver and Blade Flurry? So moving Sigar around to make sure we're cleaving all of the yellow souls will make him heal less, because he basically sucks up the life from any of the souls' health pool. So if the souls are low on health, he's not going to heal as much. And if you're lucky and he picks a soul that's like almost dead, that heal on him, like you can see them die here, that stops the heal from going off. So making sure all of them are dead are really good. So we're only a minute in, and we pretty much have cleared the entire room. So this is basically, once Sigar gets low here, he's most likely going to die without healing again. So 3 total sets. Now, one thing they have changed is that these envies, they don't have a threat table. They fixate players. So tanks, don't freak out. If you're a DPS or a healer and you're complaining that your tank doesn't have threat, it's not that they don't have threat, it's that they fixate. So one thing that they changed, though, which is super nice, is they no longer can critically melee, which was a big problem. If they would all happen to target the same player and crits, that player was getting pretty much one-shot, which was really obnoxious. I landed a paralysis on this one envy that's kind of left over, and we're going to then head into the next boss fight. I can't remember if this thing ends up disappearing or coming in. I think it disappears or despawns after a short period of time once the mini-boss dies, but we're going to be heading to the final boss. Now, one thing you're going to notice in this room is it's a lot brighter. Actually, throughout the entire dungeon, it's been pretty bright. I'm using a stinky bright potion. I think it makes this dungeon look a little bit better, easier to see things, and it has a little bit better contrast on the red, I think, but that's probably why it looks brighter. They've also nerfed this boss to be a little bit, I don't think it's friendlier to melee per se, but they have reduced the radius of these erupting torments by 4 yards. So it used to be 14, now they're 10, which makes the proceeding phase 1 after an intermission a little bit easier to dodge. It was kind of difficult for a lot of like slower classes to get out of those circles on the ground. So here we are dodging just the telekinetic tosses. As long as you're paying attention to these arrows, this fight's pretty chill. The AoE damage happens whenever a statue lands on the ground. So if you're ever wondering where that damage is coming from, that's it. So using a defensive here, like right before it lands, would be good. Obviously, you can see it doesn't do anything super lethal. Maybe in like really high keys, it could get kind of one-shotty, but I don't think it'll ever actually get to that point because we're going to have more stamina. Our Reshi wraps are going to be more powerful. We're going to have turbo boost in a 2 months or so. So there's some good stuff here. Now, one thing I want to note is I'm actually soaking 2 beams right now, and our rogue is soaking 2 beams with he used cloak and evasion, I think, actually at the same time, or maybe he procced evasion actually. So when he's channeling, I'll talk about it on the next intermission, but basically if you inch really close to his hitbox on kind of a corner of 2 statues, you can soak both beams at the same time. I'm surprised they never fixed this. Maybe there's not really a great workaround. There used to be a way where you can soak all 4 beams. I believe they removed it or fixed it way back in Shadowlands. But having 2 players with immunities, or a tank and an immunity player, soak all of the beams is like kind of free. So we're watching out for these again. Again, this fight is actually really, really anticlimactic. Blizzard has a funny way of doing that with a couple bosses. I think this boss and the last boss of like Priority is fairly anticlimactic. At the very end of the fight, it's kind of just like, oh, the fight's basically over. So as you can see, I'm inching in very, very, very close to his hitbox. You're using kind of the tiles on the floor to create like the geometric kind of cross in between him. So if you stand on the line as close to the line that's moving perpendicular, you can soak 2 beams. So this time it's the Shaman with Astral Shift and me with just being a tank. I'm also going to stand inside of these circles. They don't really do that much damage, especially if you have things like Celestial Brew active. You have I had Diffuse Magic active in that case, as well as things like Dampen Harm, Fortifying Brew. If you have a defensive as a tank on this fight, you can just stand in it. They did remove the Stigma of Pride Tank Buster, which used to be a ramping damage over time effect over 18 seconds. With that being removed, this is the most boring tank fight. I shouldn't say the most boring tank fight, because there are stuff for you to do. There's things to dodge. But for the most part, it's pretty mundane to do this fight as a tank. And this is pretty much it. So we're going to be wrapping it up with a little less than a minute to go. I think we end up finishing around the 43-second mark. Left on the timer, 42. So 42 seconds left on the timer, 3 deaths, a little bit over count, and that's on accident for sure. But yeah, that's Halls of Atonement. So this is actually a really good route. I think it's fairly pug friendly as well. It's pretty hold W. The only kind of tricky part for this is obviously we pulled a lot of trash onto boss. In a lower key, you don't need to. And obviously we accidentally pulled 1 extra slasher, which we could have easily avoided. I pulled it, I'm pretty sure, and then melding in the wrong spot, obviously forced it to come up, and then we had to kill it. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the run. Let me know if you have any questions down below, and I will catch you all in the next one. Peace.